Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything.
And welcome back, Engagers, once again to another episode of the Professor Game Podcast. And we are today with Miguel. But Miguel, before we kick off, are you prepared to engage?
I am totally ready to engage.
Let's do this because we have Miguel Sicart, who is an associate professor at the IT University, where he teaches play design. He is also the author of The Ethics of Computer Games, MIT Press, Beyond Choices, also in the MIT Press, and Play Matters. His work combines the philosophy of technology, game studies, and design theory to try to make sense of play. His most recent research focuses on the nature of play in the software society and on the ridiculous nature of all software. Miguel, is there anything we're missing from that intro that we should mention?
No, I think that's me in a nutshell. So I think you got everything you needed to say about me. There's nothing else, right? Now we can call it a day. There's nothing like that's it, right?
No, we're done, right?
We're done. There's no more stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But before we call it a day, we would like to know, Miguel, what was just a regular day or a regular week, whatever we want to go for? We want to sort of be in the skin of Miguel for a while and see what it looks like.
That's a very funny question to ask this year. Because if I am to be perfectly honest, I have no idea what a regular day looks like anymore. I don't even know. That thing you write, a day, I had to look it up on Wikipedia. Like, no, it's an ancient measure of time that had before COVID-19. Because everything right now is kind of like a continuum of time. So how does a regular day look like? So I think in general, I think my day is divided between work and family time and a little bit of sort of personal time for myself, so to say. So I love doing what I do, so it never feels like work is work. But even so, that's the most dangerous thing to ever say. So even so,
we won't let the authorities at the university know this.
Yeah, no. This they won't listen to this. No. I'll try to make it so like, no, who that was not me. There's somebody else. They're impersonating. So I try to work only as much as I have to work, and of course that goes up and down. So sometimes and some periods are very busy, and some others are a little bit more flexible. But so like that's one of the things that I do enjoy my job very much. I do a lot of research, but I think what I really like the most is teaching, and so I'm always looking forward to the days I have class because meeting with young people who are there to make the point that you're wrong, or at least that's what I encourage them to do. I think that's very awesome. And outside, so I like doing sports and keeping myself active. I read a lot. I read almost everything I can about almost anything. I have piles of books. I finish almost every book I start, but I've started way too many books. And and I also, I love playing games, I guess. Sometimes, not really, actually. That's a job line. Like, I study games. I like playing. I'm a one game person, so I like playing one game very deeply. And then I do enjoy a lot sort of family time, so like cooking with my kids or watching them when they go to sports and all of that stuff. So like that's also sort of super important for me. It's kind of like it's the most important thing. Everything else is the most important thing of the least important things.
Absolutely, it makes sense, and it should be that way for all of us, definitely. And you were mentioning that you like to play games, and this is the first time I'm saying this. Today, I got my Stadia controller, the Google application. I wanted to test it out, and so I got the controller to play it with the Resident Evil game that just came out.
Oh, I look forward to that one. I'm a big fan of horror games and horror narratives, and particularly of the Resident Evil series. I prefer Silent Hill, but yeah, I think I'm also looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. I played like
It
5
does,
minutes,
yeah.
of course, the day job.
Yeah, exactly. One cannot. We don't have enough time to play. That's
for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And then family time and these things, this nonsense.
Exactly. Well,
no, those are very, very important things, especially family time, as you were mentioning before. It is something that I always try to set time aside for. I don't have kids, at least not yet. But we do spend time together. And, there's my higher part of the tree family, so my mom and my in-laws and so on. So that's very, very important as well. And we have to set time apart for that.
It's also what keeps us grounded, which I think it's good.
Yeah,
it's good.
Definitely. And talking about, you're mentioning observing your kids, playing their sports, and that kept me thinking about storytelling. And that's exactly the next question that I always like to make our guests. It's all about a story, of course, but this is a special kind of story. It's about one of those times where you had one of those, what we like to call fail moments, first attempt in learning situations where, things didn't go your way, basically. You were, either writing or preparing a class or, I don't know, something probably related to games, which is your daily life for sure. Yeah. And we'd like to know, how it went. How do you get out of it? What did you learn from that experience, basically?
Yeah. So, I've been doing this sort of whole academic life and researching and teaching for a long time. So I have like a very, very good list of failures. But I think, and I mean, it's important. I never trust anybody who does not fail. Failure is so important. And also learning to deal with failure. So one of my favorite ones is, I guess not favorite ones, but like 2 interesting lessons in failure. They are related to what ended up being my second book. So at that time, I wanted to write a sort of a practical book about the design of ethics. And so I managed to convince 4 extremely talented students to help me make a Facebook game. And this is, Facebook was already evil, but it was before everybody knew Facebook is evil. So this was 2010-ish. And so we wanted to make this kind of ambitious, ethically grounded, multiplayer, asynchronous, asymmetric game where, different players would a lot of things. And in my head and in the pen and paper playtest that the students and me developed, everything worked fine. And then we stumbled with the harsh reality of actually making something work. And nothing worked. It was miserable. Like, all of our brilliant ideas were brilliant on paper, and then we realized that because the thing had to run on computers, not just on computers, but it also had to run on a platform that was complicated to develop for, like Facebook was a few years back. So it was like, it was a mess. It was a disaster. And there I really learned how complicated it is to make video games. Not unlike games. Games are also complicated to make, but video games are even more complicated because once you address some of the issues with say, game balance or storytelling or any other thing, then you actually have to get it to run on that stupid machine, and that's just the worst. And that connects to, I guess, the other sort of relative failure, and that is that, in my opinion, my second book has some of my best writing, and very few people have read it. And that's one of those where you don't really have that much control about what's going on. But it's one of these that I think I've learned a lot from. Why is it that people did not engage with that book? So a little failure and a relatively bigger failure. I'm still super proud of that book, and I think it's great. But it obviously
you're speaking of Beyond Choices, right?
Yeah, Beyond Choices. Yeah, it stings a little bit that it didn't get to the readership I thought would get. And it's not like I want to, sell books. I'm an academic. I don't want to sell anything. But I think that book had a readership, and I think it didn't get to that readership. And part of it was also my fault. So that's part of the stories of productive failure.
And what would you say out of these two? Of course, seems one of the lessons on the software development side are relatively clear. You didn't expect it would be so complicated, and you have to account for that because nowadays, as technology, almost everything is possible, but there's an associated effort, economic, time-wise, whatever that looks like. With the other one, is there any less, or on that one, if you can comment as well if you want, are there, any key lessons you would say, well, this is what I would do different if I had to face this once again?
I've been thinking hard about why the book didn't reach its readership. And I think that's one of the really complicated challenges to meet. And in my opinion, that book tried to do too many things in a way that was perhaps ended up making things too complicated. So I think it has way too many arguments in it. So it's very easy for readers to get lost. I'm not necessarily fond of like one argument books, but that book is a jigsaw. So all the pieces are there, but it's not always totally clicking together. And I don't think I did a very good job in talking about that book and talking about the contents when I had the opportunity. So I think the failure is both on the structure of the book and also on the way I sort of just published it and almost never talk about it again. And that's sort of, you need to put an effort to get these things up and running. And then what I learned from the game is I never developed for Facebook. That's basically what I learned.
Yeah, it makes it even more complicated, developing for Facebook. And it's very platform specific and all these things. Many people have done great things there and made a lot of money as well. But
but it's not like it's not worth it. I don't think it's worth it. But
there you go.
The lesson I took.
For sure. And talking about the opposite situation, something that actually went well. You talked about a book. You talked about a software development at some point. Is there I'm sure there are many. What would be maybe one or again two, as you did before, occasions where you did something and it actually after the first or the nth try it actually worked and you're proud to see it and to talk about it and say, well, this is some of my good work, and of course we would like to see some of the key lessons or the key things that happened there for you to arrive to that success.
Right. So this is a funny question now too, because I'm in the process of finishing a book. And it's going to be a great book. I have like 2 weeks to finish it. And so I've been working on this book since 2015. Wow. Oh, so that's like a long time ago. And it's been changed and so on. And so like now it finally has a shape and it has, it works. And I finally got into the rhythm and the structure of writing it 2 years ago. And it was so sort of mentally time consuming that I needed something to balance that out. So I started thinking, I really just want to make stupid software. And jokingly, I started a project called Ridiculous Software, which was essentially a critique of the faith we have in computers and of the faith we have in artificial intelligence, grounded on making stupid software. So software that is literally stupid. And so I, as a joke, I made an app for the iPhone, for iOS, that's a white screen that dims over time and then it becomes dark. And then if you swipe up or tap twice, then the screen lights up again. And for some reason, you can download that app on the App Store. It passed all the tests for whatever Apple wants to test things. And I think I'm super proud of the Ridiculous Software project because I think it is capturing a lot of the things that I actually want to say with a sense of humor and with like making stupid stuff that is just extremely directly rewarding. And it's kind of, it's very interesting in the ideas that I'm exploring. And it's also interesting in the software that I'm making, and like everything kind of clicks together. And it's literally because I'm just laughing at everything. It's because I'm not taking it seriously. It's kind of, the book is very tense, and this Ridiculous Software project is like the thing that I relax with, and I think that's also why it's so fun and productive to work with, because it's just really silliness. Silliness is important.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I took a very quick look at your webpage. It's ridiculous.software, right?
Yes.
So I was very quickly looking at it just to have a feel of that, but I didn't really get into the description of the apps. But that sounds very, very interesting, and as well as a critique, to see the things in a completely different sense. But I've mentioned many times, there was a time when gamification and game-inspired design, and everybody was a gamification designer and a game-inspired designer, and they were consultants in gamification. And thank God that time is over. Most of the people are not saying that, and the ones who are at least are, really fixed on doing that. But now it's AI and blockchain and all of that, and, worshiping all these latest technologies, so to speak. So I find it very, very interesting as well.
I really need to make something with both. I've done one app with AI, but I really want to make more stuff with AI and definitely with blockchain, because of all the stupid, ridiculous technologies that are out there, that one is kind of like a class of its own, because it's not only not very useful, it's also destroying the planet. So it's kind of like, why are we making these things? Like, somebody should say, seriously, we need to stop. And so I find it like I need to put some ridiculous spin on blockchain and on AI, because it's just it makes no sense. but maybe I'm just getting older and more grumpy, and maybe there's like a lot of value in blockchain.
Grumpy grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. I'm game for being the grumpy grandpa of blockchain. Like, I'm totally like, that's fine.
Yeah, again, I'm sure that there are many things that these things could be useful for. The thing is, and I completely, I 100% agree with the vibe of, why are you just doing this and saying that this is fantastic because it has blockchain and AI? That doesn't make any sense. If the technology is conducive to making something better, and as you were saying, the consequences of using that technology versus something that is different are also positive, then great. That is, you're bringing value to the world. If not, as you were saying, you're actually destroying value. And that's exactly the opposite of what we all should be doing, for sure.
Exactly. And anyway, we don't need to do a blockchain podcast. So
for sure. You can find many of those, but you could be the Grumpy Grandpa Blockchain podcast. We could
exactly. Do yes, I would not go there.
I'm sure it would be popular as well. Anyways,
it would be very popular. Yes.
Yes, for sure. So Miguel, is there, when you're thinking of creating one of these games, or maybe one of the games that you made before, games with a purpose, games with some sort of sense, do you follow any sort of process? And I'm sure there's many things that you've seen in your extensive academic career. How would you recommend somebody who says, I want to make a game with a purpose, I want to do gamification maybe? Is there any process that you use, that you recommend, that you can tell us?
Yes, I have a lot of opinions. How long do we have? This thing can just record, right? So 12 hours later. No, so I used to teach game design here at my university, at the IT University of Copenhagen. So when it comes to sort of general, sort of the making of games and the making of video games, the approach that I used to teach is, it started because, a lot of game design is taught as you need to create systems that engage players, and you use mechanics and rules and blah, blah, blah. And I always told my students that the material we work with in game design is not rules or systems or computers or cardboard. The material we work with is people, right? So you always have to start with people. And the way of starting with people is trying to figure out, okay, what do you want people to get out of this experience? Why should they be playing what you're playing? I try to sort of get them to answer that question from the get-go. Some students really thrived on sort of trying to think about it as which emotions do I want to create in players? Some other wanted to construct worlds where players would be immersed in and would get something out of it and would be reflected. But the idea is always you start with the player. And once you start with the player, the other thing that you have to do, as I taught my students, is make a toy. When I taught game design, my students had to start making small toys. That's the core of their games. Because in any game, there's always one core loop or series of loops that it's the thing that you go back to. And I am very much a mechanics-driven player, so I love video games that are rich in mechanics and perhaps not that rich in story. And that's why I always wanted to go into make the smallest playable toy that shows that this thing is going to be fun in the long run. And so to me, that's the way I taught game design, right? Start by thinking, what do I want players to get out of or to get out of this experience, and how can I turn that into a toy? Something that's small and playful and not very gamey, but something that they can express themselves with and think through. And once you have those two things, then start putting everything else on top of it. But that was always my starting point. And then when I do sort of broader play design, then I have a similar but different approach where I try to sort of tell them, we play because we want to take over the world. We play because we want to express ourselves. We play because we want to have activities where we can decide what to do and how to do it within boundaries that we have freely accepted. And so that's how we need to identify what to do and how to redesign it. So we need to make things fun and expressive and personal for people. And always with a sense of humor. I think a sense of humor is fundamental in all kinds of playful interactions and of playful designs.
Absolutely. And that just very quickly, it brings me back to a memory of a past guest who was saying that they were using this sort of gamer humor in a class that was not necessarily full of gamers. So it just reminded me of the differences of humor between different types of players. And you were saying start with the players, of course, understand them and what they want for them to get. And then, you mentioned the humor part, and it sort of clicked together with that past comment as well. So yeah, absolutely. Start with the players and what you want them to achieve, the mechanics and so on. That is definitely what we completely agree on.
Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement.
Miguel, if you were to say, of course, no silver bullet or anything of the sort, but if there's maybe a best practice, something that you would recommend people to do when doing game design in general, what would that be? Of course, maybe it's thinking about the player to start. I don't know. What would you go for if I told you what's the best practice in game design?
Okay, so yes, there's two best practices.
Sure.
There's a theme here. I like to say things in twos today. Okay, so one of them is always make stuff. Playing is something that we engage with technology of all kinds, from computers to basketballs to dolls. And I think it's really important for anybody who designs games or playful experiences to understand the role of those things that mediate our experience. So if you really want to make something with computers, understand how computers work and make a lot of things to really get into how they work. If you want to work with rackets, then really play a lot with rackets. Really get engaged on making things and how the world works. That's one. And then the second one is all good play designers spend the day looking at how other people play. You go around and you're just observing playful behaviors out in the world, because from all of those, there's going to be something that surprises you. There's going to be something that rings a bell, and suddenly you know exactly how to solve the problem you have in your game. So look at how people are playing, both formally, how they play games, but also informally. Look at them. I tell my students, take a look at how people play when they are waiting in the queue. Take a look at how people are playing when they are, on the phone waiting for somebody to answer. Take a look at what people do when they are idle, because they will tend to play and they will tend to do it in a way that will tell you something about what we find fun. Also look at experts. When experts are doing something they really know how to do, they're going to add a little bit of expression, a little bit of their own personal touch. And if you can take that and translate it into whatever you're doing, then you're going to make something fun. So that's my two recommendations.
Those are fantastic recommendations. In fact, I think they both lead to practice and observation, both, which are, at the center of expertise in any field, I would say. So I think they're very, very good recommendations. And again, I would argue almost for anything that you want to get good at, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And I think observing other people and relating to other people is a fundamental thing that we need to practice a lot more. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about observing and listening, is there somebody that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game, a featured guest for this podcast?
That's a very good question. I've been thinking about it, and I don't have any specific name for you. I have a type of person that I would like to listen to, and that is somebody who produces somebody else's work. And so let me explain why. One of my absolute favorite videos on the internet. I'm a massive David Bowie fan, and there's this phenomenal video of Bowie's sound engineer explaining how he made the sound in Heroes, in that famous song Heroes. And then he's explaining that this masterful song was actually recorded using 3 microphones that were distant from each other, so that echo that's so otherworldly in that song happens in that particular way. And of course, Bowie wrote the song, but he made it happen. I think it's always interesting to see somebody who produces some creative artistic work. So like, how do you make sure that the brilliant ideas of the creative people you have out there can actually come to being? And I think that's, a studio director from a game studio, or a music producer, or a film producer, somebody who facilitates the creative aspect. I think I always find listening to these facilitators extremely fascinating.
I was thinking if there had been somebody in the past, and there's probably more, I'm not sure, but somebody like, I'm sure you've heard of Jesse Schell, who, yes, of course, he is definitely a game designer, but at this point as well, Schell Games is much more than just Jesse. So I'm guessing that he also has to play that role of orchestrating all that creativity and putting things together and making them happen, right?
Absolutely. Or somebody like Tracy Fullerton, who manages to make, absolute masterpieces while coordinating. She directs the games, but she also coordinates the work of a team that has a very, creative, diverse view. So I think people like that are always fascinating to listen to.
They both sound very, very exciting, very interesting. I think we have not spoken to Tracy Fullerton, so I'm going to jot her down, see if we can get in contact for sure. And talking about recommendations, you have 3 books. A 4th is coming up. Maybe we'll chat about that book in the future as well. But, sitting right next to your 3 books, or maybe 2, because that person did not, reach your 2nd book, as we were saying before. What book would you like to be sitting next to them, or what other book would you recommend as well?
I'm a horrible person for recommending books, because there's always something extremely interesting that I am reading. But to be honest, the book that I've read, the academic-ish book that I've read most times, that I'm most envious of, is The Utopia of Rules by David Graeber. So this is a book about the history of bureaucracy, and it's massively brilliant. And I'm so envious of the insightfulness and the intelligence and also the generosity that book has. That I think it's great, and it has a relatively short 10 pages passage dedicated to play right about the end of the 2nd part of the book, if I remember correctly, and it's some of the best writing in play outside of game studies, and also inside game studies, if I may say so. So the Utopia of Rules, it's really a phenomenal book.
Sounds like a very interesting book, and I have to say I have not read it. One more to add to my weekly list of books. I'm going to go crazy, and I'm not reading as much as I want to be. I don't want to say I should, because you never should.
No,
or shouldn't.
there's no shoulds, but I know the feeling. If I turn around right now, I have like a pile of books I've just received that they all look great, and I don't know exactly where and when and how I'm going to have the time to read them. But they will be read eventually.
And I look to the other side, and I see a pile of games as well that need to be played. I tend to be a one-game player as well, as you were saying before, but I don't manage to do that most of the time.
No, I mean, they require time and dedication. So yeah.
Because of all the love and all the work that goes behind them. I completely agree.
Exactly, yeah.
There's so much behind any game, any book. But anyways, nice, beautiful recommendations. I really enjoyed them. And, sort of a recommendation, but maybe more on your own personal side. What would you say is your favorite game?
Oh, ouch. Okay,
Tough
so
one,
my
right?
my favorite game, if we have to talk about any type of game, it's going to be football or soccer. It's the beautiful game, and it's my favorite game. But it's of course a sport. So
Still
that's
a game,
one.
right?
It's still a game. I know, and it is really it's the game I'm terrible at it, so I don't play because I am like really, really not good. But I love watching it. I love it at all levels, and it's the best. So that's kind of like my favorite game / sport. And if I have to think about let me just also give you a board game.
Sure.
And I think a board game, one of my favorite board games is Lost Cities by Rainer Knizia, who's sort of, the grand old person of board games. This is a 2-player game. And I think the reason why I would put it as my favorite is that I've played it very often with my wife. I've never won, and I still go back to playing it. So, and I think it's like literally I've never won at it, but yet I go back to it. So that's how good that game is. And then if I have to recommend a video game, that would probably put me in trouble.
You were talking about Silent Hill at the start. I'm not sure if that may be a series that you really enjoy.
Yeah, especially Silent Hill 2. It's a classic. But I would say, I think if I had to go to a desert island with a game, it would probably be Spelunky, and that's I love the Spelunky. I haven't played it now in a few years. I don't know. I think I've exhausted it, but I played so many hours of Spelunky, and it's so brilliant. So I would say my favorite video game is Spelunky. There you go. Now I'm on record saying what my favorite video game is.
There you go.
Yeah.
And Miguel, one last sort of, this is definitely not a recommendation, and feel free to kind of brag a little bit. What would you say is your superpower, that thing in game design that you do perhaps better than most other people? Not necessarily absolutely everybody in the world, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know, because I'm more of an academic than a game designer. I don't design games per se. So I think my strength, my superpower as an academic, so somebody who studies games and also makes things closer to games, I think it's what some people may see as a weakness. I'm not a very original thinker. I don't come up with new ideas. But what I am really good at is putting together other people's ideas in ways that, work well together. So with a friend, I joke that it seems like I see reality as a collection of cables dangling from the ceiling, and I just plug them together, and sometimes sparks happen and sometimes fires get started. But that's what I'm really good at, putting together things that are seemingly disconnected and getting them to work. And I think that's my superpower.
And that's the definition of innovation, Miguel. Don't feel you're not original. Nothing is completely original. So there you go.
But I have friends who are original thinkers. I am not, and I'm totally cool with it. I'm totally fine with it.
Absolutely, Miguel. Thank you very much for, the investment in time that you did today. I know you have family, you have work, you have your game designs, you have your games, you have many things going on in your life, especially now during this pandemic times. Is there any final piece of advice you want to leave us with? Tell us where we can find more about you, your books, I don't know, maybe social media, before we say that it's game over.
So you can find me on the internet. I'm really bad at being on the internet lately, I have to say. So I have a Twitter account at Miguel Sicart. So my name and my surname all together. And I tweet like once every half year. I used to be very active, and somehow like I've lost the interest in it, because Twitter is such a toxic place.
Yeah,
sometimes it's also full of lovely people. Yeah. I have a website, Miguels I have to remember this. Okay, so now you're going to hear I have a very loud keyboard. So apologies for that, people who are listening to this. And also apologies because I don't remember my own URL. So it's miguelsicart.net. And you can find there a little bit about me and my publications and my writing and all of that stuff. And then ridiculous.software is the website for this stupid software project. It will be growing. I've just released a new app like a few weeks ago that translates pictures into GIFs, because why not? Using artificial intelligence, of course. Anyway, so that's where you can find me. And that's basically me on the interwebs.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you once again, Miguel, for being today with us. We're unleashing all of that innovation, connecting all those cables together. However,
thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here again. And however, good things start and they have to end as well. So at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over.
Hey, Engagers. Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Miguel. And I'd like to know if you have any questions that you would like to ask other guests in the future. All you have to do is go to professorgame.com/question and ask that burning question that you have. If it is selected, it will come up in a future episode and you will get your answer. And before you go on to your next mission, remember to subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.